What is up, guys? It is Barry Michael Doyle here, and welcome to the very first episode of our JavaScript 101 course. If you are brand new to the idea of programming, then this series is the perfect place for you to start. This series is also great for developers coming from other languages or developers in need of a recap. So what is JavaScript exactly? JavaScript is a text-based programming language that is native to web browsers. You know, web browsers like Chrome, Firefox, Internet Explorer. If you're not watching this on the YouTube app, you're probably watching this on a web browser. It's mainly used for making websites more interactive. Although, due to its huge rise in popularity, which is probably also why you clicked on this video, it's also been adopted in other areas, such as mobile development, backend, embedded systems. I mean, I've personally even used it to build watch faces for Fitbit a couple of years ago. Anyways, before I bore you with a whole bunch of technical little facts about it, let's move over to making things a little bit more interactive, shall we? Welcome to this little web app called JSBin. I'll leave a link in the description for the site so you can join along if you want. Bear in mind, your version will look slightly different from mine since I've hidden some of the elements and zoomed in a bit for the sake of this video. I really do encourage you to try follow along on the site yourself to get the most out of this course. I found many times that by doing the exercises with an instructor, you tend to get way more out of the courses. Also, as you go along, you might run into problems that I don't. If this does happen, and I really hope it doesn't, please feel free to ask for help in the comment section below, and I'll try to help you out as soon as I can. You're also welcome to ask any questions you like down there, and I'll try my best to answer them accurately. Literally, they could be almost anything. There might be some things I won't answer. Don't ask me dodgy questions, please. Anyway, let's carry on. So usually people learn JavaScript with HTML and CSS, since in web applications, like this one we have over here, consist of HTML elements. It uses CSS to style it, and then there's JavaScript running in the background to actually do things. Most instructors tend to teach JavaScript with HTML and CSS. I mean, this kind of makes sense because you would usually work with them all together. I figured for the sake of this series, it would be better to teach you the foundations of JavaScript first before distracting you with HTML and CSS. If the series goes well, then we will most likely dabble with those technologies later down the line. Anyway, let's move over to this JSBin that we've just created. We have a JavaScript section, and this is the section where we'll write our code. We can write a whole bunch of text in here, we can write whatever we want. This is not valid code, but we can just write stuff in here. We've got a spot to write stuff. And then when we run it, see, this already points out, hey, something's wrong. It says expected an assignment or function call and instead saw an expression. This is a bit hard to debug now because we don't know JavaScript yet, but as we learn things, you will learn how to read these error messages and understand them as time goes by. But right now it's under red, basically saying, hey, this is wrong. This is not going to run. If we do try to run this, we're going to get a whole bunch of error messages. You see this, it's quite difficult to read up front, but essentially it's reading this first line going, okay, there's an error. And as soon as we get that first line error, it stops because an error happened. We can't run the code is broken. So let's clear this for now. And let's write something that can actually be read. So this is quite complicated at the start, but let me just type it out and then explain to you what's going on. I'm going to type out console.log. And then I'm going to open brackets, and you can see there it already automatically closes these brackets for me. And then I'm just going to type in the number 5. Let's go with 5. Now let me click run. And as you can see, 5 is printed to the console. So this is essentially, it does what it says it does. We have the word console, and then we say dot log. And console.log will log whatever is inside it to the console. If you write another console.log underneath and log 6 underneath, let's clear our console before running new stuff. We've clicked clear now, and we click run. It prints 5 on the first line, and then the next line it prints 6 because this happened. We could, in the middle, write console.log, and I'm going to put in a string called hello world. And we're going to run that. As you can see, I didn't clear the previous stuff, so let's clear everything. Run it again. It runs 5, and then it runs hello world, and then it runs console.log 6. Now bear in mind, I needed to put quotes here. You could put double quotes here, or you could put single quotes here. But if you do put single quotes here, you need to actually end it with single quotes as well. You can't start with single quotes and then end with double quotes. It will freak out and give you problems. So that is for that. If I clear this and run this again, hello world still runs. It prints out in double quotes, but as you can see, I've written single quotes there. I'll talk about that a bit later. Now, bear in mind, you can't write this. You can't write hello world like this. If you run that, it will complain and get confused. It's a syntax error. And again, I'll explain that in just a second. So let's delete these 2 lines for now and go back to just console log 5. Now, usually when you write JavaScript code, most people like to end their lines with a semicolon. And this basically acts as a full stop. So if I run here, everything is going to work just fine. Now, technically, instead of printing on a new line, I could write console.log 6 over here and put a full stop, aka a semicolon there. It's not really a full stop, it's a semicolon, but I'm just using a full stop as an example. If I clear this and run this, it prints 5 and then it prints 6. So that is what a semicolon does. It basically says that this is the end of the line. Now, I definitely want to mention that these semicolons are optional. So again, we can have this on multiple lines. That's the end of the line, and that's the end of the line. They're obviously necessary over here, because if we didn't have semicolons and these were on the same line, this would freak out. This would be like, well, actually, it tells me that I'm missing a semicolon. But in modern JavaScript, you can kind of choose if you want to have it there or not. If I run this, you get an error, you see? But if I add semicolons, it only tells me I'm missing a semicolon here because it is required here to separate, saying this is a line and this is a line. So that works again. Again, I'm missing my semicolon there, but technically that should be there. As I wanted to say, these semicolons are optional. You don't have to put them in there. I personally prefer to not put them in because it's just extra clutter and it gets in the way of stuff. But I know a lot of people, lots of my colleagues do prefer to put them in. So whatever you decide to do, I just recommend being consistent. If you're not going to have semicolons, then don't put them anywhere unless they're absolutely necessary. An example of where they're absolutely necessary is when we do this, obviously, because you're keeping it all on one line. But usually I'd recommend just changing this to 2 lines anywhere. It is easier to read this way, in my opinion. As I said, be consistent. If you're going to use semicolons, use them everywhere. If you're not going to use semicolons, use them nowhere. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you guys is the concept of comments. So I'm going to start by just showing you what they are and then explain. So currently, as you can see, we run this, we get 5 and 6, we clear it. Now look at this. If I put in a double slash right before this console log, it actually goes green. You can see it goes green. It changes color there. That's not exactly what I wanted to show you. This isn't just to change color. But what this actually does is this tells the compiler, remember a compiler runs through this whole code. It runs line by line and reads it and does stuff. It basically executes each line by line. This comment tells the compiler to skip reading this line, to skip running it. So in this case, if I run now, it's only going to console log 5 and it's going to skip running console log 6. If I put a console.log 7 underneath, we're going to get 5. It's going to skip 6 and say 7. So let's run that. There we get 5 and 7. So that's how to do a single line comment. The syntax for a multi-line comment, let's say we did something like this. I'm uncommenting this now, I'm clearing this and I run it, I get 5, 6, 7. So that's as we expect. Let's comment out line 6 and 7 together. Now, obviously I could just do this. This works perfectly fine. But let's say I was going to have lots of lines. I could do something like this. I start with a opening slash, put a star, and then you can see already everything goes green. So everything after the star is going to be commented out. Now this says unclosed comments. You should usually close these. So you close it by the same way you open it. See, I opened it with a slash and then a star. So I'm going to close it with a star and a slash. Now if I write console.log 8 under there, and we run this, prints 5, it skips over lines 6 and 7 and prints 8. So that is fantastic. I figured it'd be useful to show you how comments work, because in the meantime, we're going to use comments for me to just type around in here and say do stuff, and then I can write console.log, let's just write hi. That's not how you spell hi. And we clear that, we run, and look, hi is there, and I can say do more stuff, and I can run, and everything will keep running and working as expected. So that is fantastic. Now the final thing I want to discuss before ending off this video is the concept of data types. Now let me just clear this to make things easier. In here I'm going to write 3 of the 7 data types in JavaScript. Now I know there's 7 and I'm only going to tell you 3, but I will tell you the rest later. One of them is extremely complicated. I don't even want to go down that road until an episode much later. But for now, I'm just going to discuss 3. Now, the first one I want to discuss is a number. Now, obviously, we've already seen this when I console.log 5. That is a number. I could run that, we get 5. A number can be anything from positive infinity to negative infinity, or the other way around, negative infinity to positive infinity. In fact, there is actually, if you write infinity and run that, it actually says infinity. Infinity is a valid number in JavaScript. It's basically just meant to say the maximum number possible. And you can also write negative infinity. If I run that, we get negative infinity. Now, obviously, I could also just write 0. 0 is a number that we can use. Let's say negative 5. We grasp that. Now, the other thing about numbers is we can actually get fractions. So I could say 5.6. If I run that, it works perfectly fine. So numbers are basically anything from negative infinity to infinity. It's a number. It's not that hard to understand. The next one that we're going to talk about is a string. So let me clear the console here. A string I've already explained. I can say Barry, and that is Barry. The reason it is a string is we've wrapped it in quotation marks. Now, this is basically just used all around. Obviously, as we're programming things, you're going to want to work with words. You're going to want to work with, well, English as a language. You might want to work with other languages. But essentially, if you want to capture a piece of text as information, you wrap it in these quotation marks and you will get a string. Now, obviously, I've mentioned before, I could replace this with a single quote, and this will work as well. If I clear this and run this, Barry and Barry, they both come out as strings. This works quite well. If, example, we have the double quotes here, and I want to say Barry's test, and then we can run that, and you can see Barry's test runs perfectly fine. Obviously, if I couldn't write single quote Barry's test here, because, you know, it gets all confusing now, because it closes the single quote over there. You know, it just doesn't work. In the same way, I could say, for example, I could say Barry said, and then I have quotation marks saying hi. That doesn't work because this opens up here and it closes over there. Or this open and then, yeah, you know, it's just confusing. That's why I could wrap this in single quotes and our problem would have been solved, as you can see. Now I can run this and Barry said hi actually works. This is a escape character. I'm going to explain escape characters in another video where we focus on strings. I just wanted to point out that we have different types of data. We have numbers, we have strings, they work differently, and I'm going to go through each one in detail later. Maybe the next one I'll talk about numbers, the next one I'll talk about strings. The other data type, which is quite important and I want you to understand early on, is a Boolean. So far, numbers, pretty self-explanatory. Numbers are numbers. They can be fractions, they're numbers. So in other languages, you sometimes get floats, which are fraction numbers. In JavaScript, you just get numbers. Numbers cover floats and everything. String is text, like I've shown here. And now we have a Boolean. Now, a Boolean is true or false. It can either be true, or if I copy this, it can be false. If I clear this, I run this, we get true and false. Now, bear in mind, you shouldn't get distracted by, there's a difference. Console.log true with quotation marks around that is a string. So you see, this is a string, but this is a Boolean. In the same way, you know, if we had console.log 0 versus console.log 0 in a string, this is a Boolean, this is a string, this is a number, this is a string, and this is a Boolean. Obviously, we could wrap false in brackets, in quotation marks as well, and then false becomes a string. I know it's a bit weird right now, me trying to explain these basic differences, but this stuff is really going to matter a lot down the line when we dive into deeper, more complex concepts. Anyways, for now, guys, I'm going to leave it there and I'm going to start another episode in a new video. I hope you're enjoying the beginning of the series. If you are, please leave a comment below. Please give a thumbs up. If you want to be kept up to date with everything, please subscribe. But for now, guys, I hope you've enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next video. All the best. Cheers.